I call the March 27th meeting of the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement to order. A quorum is present. The first item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from March 22nd, 2023. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Senator Frenz moves approval of the March 22nd, 2023 meeting minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the minutes are adopted. Members, our agenda today will be the consideration of our final fiscal bill this session, including the Secure Choice Retirement Program and Pensions Benefit Omnibus Spreadsheet. We'll start with House File 782 and Senate File 413. I will move the bill to be in front of the commission. I will invite Senator Pappas to move the DE2 author's amendment to be in consideration.
Do you want me to go down there?
It's up to you.
Oh, I'll just
I think Chair Becker-Finn has it set down there, but you can go if you like. She's here, yes.
I was here before any of you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
be together.
And it could be Senator Pappas, or I know Senator Pappas is on the commission, so she'll have to move the DE2 amendment.
Madam Chair, I'll move the DE2 amendment, and then I can explain what some of the changes are.
Go ahead, Senator Pappas.
Oh, we're not going to adopt it? Okay, never mind.
Well, you can tell us first about it, and that way then we'll know what we're adopting.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Senator
ma'am. Madam Chair. It's early on a Monday morning. So we did take this bill to state and local government and have discussions there. And I've had some offline discussions with stakeholder groups. And so, you know, I had made the decision earlier in committee to exempt or just define 10 or more businesses with 10 or more employees as eligible. Representative Becker-Finn still had one or more, and so we compromised at 5 or more. The other change is that we wanted to just provide more clarity that to explain that employees may change their contribution election annually or more frequently as determined by the board, and that new language is in there. Then there was concern about setting penalties, and we were doing some research and decided we should just leave off on any penalties and let the board decide that and come back with recommendations to the commission and to the legislature. So in the meantime, we also determined that for the first year of operation, when you're required to offer the plan to your employees, if you don't, there would just be a warning letter. So the idea is that give people time to comply with the law. Maybe there's a lack of understanding. There was concerns that we didn't clarify the opt-out provisions, so we've clarified that a number of places in the bill. And then there was a request on the phase-in, and we decided to leave that up to the board. However, typically what other states have done is they phase in the large businesses. But we didn't want to be too rigid with that because we wanted to look at what their experience is. Oregon told us that they thought their phase-in was too slow. It really wasn't a problem. Lots of businesses wanted to join. So maybe we don't need a 2-year phase-in. You know, maybe a year and a half phase-in would be adequate. I think those were the changes that we made from the last time we were before the commission.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. And Chair Becker-Finn, did you have any remarks on this before we ask for member questions and vote on the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would just say that I think the biggest change is which employees would be, how many employees you need to have be covered. I think that the language as you have before you is a good compromise.
Madam Chair.
Senator Pappas.
And I just wanted to clarify that individual employees could still join the plan even if their employer is not required to.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Any questions from our members on the DE2 before we vote on it?
Madam Chair.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have a couple amendments to the amendment, if it's proper to offer those at this time.
Why don't we go ahead and adopt the DE2 first, and then we will move to the other amendments. Does that sound like a plan?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions on the DE2? Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it might not necessarily be with the DE2, but it's just on a comment that Senator Pappas had made about employees can opt in even though their employers aren't. Would the employee go directly to the plan, or would the employer get looped back in as a part of that? Just some clarification if this is the right time for that. Thank you.
Senator Pappas.
Madam Chair, that process would be determined by the board, but the goal is to not include the employer. So the employee could go directly to the plan.
Any follow-up, Representative O'Driscoll? All right, any other discussion on the DE2? Seeing no further discussion on the DE2, all those in favor of adopting it, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. I understand that we do, now that the form is, there are no additional authors amendment, that we do have other amendments. Senator Rasmussen, is your amendments different than the 3A amendment? Is that one of your amendments?
I have the 3A, and then I have one additional amendment.
All right, why don't we go ahead and move to the 3A first? So so you're offering the 3A. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what the 3A is, or can Ms. Linchesky do that?
Madam
Yeah.
Chair, is that in our packet?
The 3A should be in your packet.
Okay, I'm just
yes.
going to go get mine.
Okay. Senator Rasmussen, did you want to
Thank you,
tell us a
Madam
little
Chair.
bit about
Yes,
it?
I'd move the 3A amendment, and happy to describe it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Senator Rasmussen.
So the 3A amendment's fairly simple. I think, when we look at, as a pension commission, we have a target of $600 million. And I believe this is the only portion of the target that will be going to non-public pension plans. And so I'm a firm believer that given the target that we have, we should prioritize public employees. And given the tough decisions that this commission is going to be making, I would rather have these dollars be going to Minnesota's public pension plans. So the 3A amendment deletes the $5 million appropriation that would be used to set up Secure Choice and distributes it out to all of our pension plans on an accrued liability basis, which is using the same methodology that we're using with essentially the remainder of our target across different pension plans. I think it's just important for us to prioritize as a pension commission and to put the public employees that we're tasked with serving first.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. I'm going to go to member questions. I'll let the two of you have the last word before we vote on the amendment. Senator Friends.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Rasmussen, and thanks, Chair Becker-Finn and Senator Pappas. I would urge members to vote no on the amendment. While they are not entirely public employees, the point of this is the benefit to the state and to the working men and women, and for that reason, I'll be voting against the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Friends. Any further discussion on the 3A amendment? Seeing no further, Representative Nadeau.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. And Senator Rasmussen, would this, so what you're thinking that the $5 million appropriated to this would come from the pension commission targets, is that correct?
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Nadeau. Currently, if we look at our proposed, spreadsheet that we'll be discussing after this bill, $5 million of that $600 million has been set aside for Secure Choice, this bill. And I'm simply saying with the 3A amendment that we would take that money back as a pension commission and distribute it to Minnesota's public pension plans. And I think, that just has to be our priority this session, given the needs and the demands and the asks that we've heard from different stakeholders as a commission.
Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion on the 3A amendment? Now we will move to the authors of the bill. Senator Pappas.
Oh, no. You were so enthusiastic, I thought you wanted to go first.
I definitely want to, but you can.
It's really simple, Madam Chair. All Minnesotans deserve the ability to retire. Please vote no on this amendment.
Senator Pappas.
Madam Chair, I just have to say I'm very disappointed in Senator Rasmussen, as I've been working with him in good faith to get Republican support for Secure Choice, and I've taken several amendments that he and the chamber have offered. In the pension world, $5 million is kind of a drop in the bucket. And I think that you could argue that there could be some pension envy out there that our public employees have access to very generous pensions. But in the private world, a lot of times they don't have access to having pensions. This is a very small appropriation to get this program started and off the ground. In other states, it's known to help the private sector because as people become more aware of their pension options, or businesses, they think, oh, well, maybe my employee or maybe I want to choose my own investments, or they get their feet wet with Secure Choice and then they transfer it into a private IRA. So I vigorously oppose this 3A amendment and am very disappointed.
Thank you, Senator Pappas and Representative Becker-Finn. I do want to point the commission that there is a letter that was submitted in your packet from Wade Laszlo, President of Minnesota Corrections Officer Retirement Association, so that you have additional comments on the 3A. Is there any further discussion to the amendment, to the author of the amendment before we go ahead and vote on this? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do appreciate the work that Senator Pappas and Representative Becker-Finn have done on the bill. I think overall, the DE that they have today has made some good improvements, such as what they've done on the penalties. I do, however, think that as a commission, we have to make tough choices, and we have lots of needs and demands. And even though $5 million might not sound like a lot, I think it's important that we show that we're going to prioritize the public pensions here today. And just as an example, this amendment, if adopted, would send more than $1.5 million to para. It would send more than $1.6 million to TRA. It would send more than $91,000 to the St. Paul Teachers Retirement Fund. And so I just think it's important that we prioritize those needs first, and would also request a roll call on this, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Seeing that there is no further discussion to the amendment, we will, roll call has been requested. And Lisa, if you could, Ms. Dreslin, if you could take the roll, please.
Chair Hurd.
No.
Representative Nelson.
No.
Representative Wolgamott is not here. Representative Berg is not here. Representative Cha.
No.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Yes.
Just a moment. Representative Nadeau.
Aye.
Senator Fritz.
No.
Senator Pappas.
No.
Senator Murphy.
No.
Senator Seeberger.
No.
Senator Nelson.
Yes.
Senator Howe.
Aye.
Senator Rasmussen.
Yes.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 noes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses.
Seeing that there are 5 yeses, 5
Ayes.
ayes and 7 nays, the motion does not prevail. My
Madam Chair.
apologies. To the bill, is we have one more amendment, that is, right, Senator Rasmussen? And do we have that amendment in all the members' packets?
No, Madam Chair, this is a very simple amendment. If we look at line, or page 2, line 12, I would move that on page 2, line 12, that we delete 5 and insert 10. And I'm happy to explain the amendment.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could the maker of the amendment motion tell us if he's in the DE or the bill itself?
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am referring to the DE since that's been adopted, the DE language.
Any further questions, Representative O'Driscoll? That would be the DE on page 2, 2.12. Any further discussions on the amendment? If not, I would go to the authors of the bill.
Madam Chair, can I explain the amendment?
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment basically goes back to what the current Senate file has, which is basically would only require this for businesses that employ 10 or more individuals. Employees would still be able to opt in, as Senator Pappas has explained, if they are below that amount. But I think that the amendment that was adopted on the Senate version of this bill made a lot of sense. We would still cover about 92% of employees in the state of Minnesota at that 10-employee cutoff. And we would also put ourselves in line with some other states like New York that has chosen to have a 10-employee cutoff, or New Jersey and Virginia that have a 25-employee cutoff. And the reason I think this is a really important amendment for us to adopt today is also with the budget targets that came out last week, we saw placeholders in there for paid family medical leave and also for sick and safe time bills. And this session is likely to see a lot of new employer mandates. And I think especially for those small businesses, those who have 10 or fewer employees, it's important that we don't start by having this be a burden on them. If this is a successful program, and if it's enacted, I hope it is successful, then we can always come back and move that number down. But I think it's, makes sense for us to proceed with caution. And I know that from talking with members of the small business community, they would appreciate this amendment being adopted today.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Any further discussion from the committee? Then I will go ahead to the authors of the bill. Oh, Representative Nadeau, my apologies.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Rasmussen, for bringing this forward. I've supported this bill in its concept from the very beginning, and I appreciate you guys for bringing it. I think this is a good amendment that provides more options, especially for those small businesses. And we've talked about this, the challenges that they have. And even though there's no mandate on those small businesses to fund anything, I think this is a good option to put in place. And in light of the last amendment that didn't pass, which was interesting. I think that this is a good amendment to take that'll allow us to change it in the future if that's the case. And I do support this amendment. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Rasmussen, for bringing this.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I speak in favor of this amendment. It is important as we move into new things that we do it in a very thoughtful way, ensuring success. And the best way to ensure success is to make sure that, while I don't support the notion of adding more mandates to our job providers, because in such a world as this, where there's such a workforce shortage, employers must provide what their employees require. And so I'm skeptical of mandates, but I have a sense that this is going to pass. And I think it's our duty to make sure that it has the best likelihood of success. And so I support this amendment, and if this is successful, which is the author's intention, which would be the intention of this, I don't want to speak for other pension committee members, but I would assume for pension committee members, for Minnesotans in general, then it's important, it's imperative that we adopt this on a scale that is most likely to prove successful, and then come back if it is and make additional tweaks. And therefore, I do support this, just knowing that even New York has exempted 10 covered employees. And here in Minnesota, without the Rasmussen Amendment, we would be just exempting half of that. And so I think it would behoove us to support this amendment as I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank Senator Pappas and Representative Becker-Finn for your continued work on this idea for working people across the state of Minnesota, and I appreciate the very obvious work that you have done to refine this and put it into the shape that it is before us today. I appreciate the compromises you've made and that work. We often talk about small businesses in the legislature with a halo, and small businesses all across the state of Minnesota provide goods and services and jobs for people who work at them. I am in a home that is supported by a small business. So I always want to make sure that we're thinking both of the employers of the people who work at small businesses, so the small business owners, but the workers there as well. And I know that in our experience in our home, that when larger organizations have an advantage because of work that happens in a place like this, it creates a disadvantage for small employers who can't compete in the pool of workers. And we shouldn't do that. We should be aware when we work on both sides that we are wanting to make sure that we are being fair for both workers and employers, large and small. And I think that Senator Pappas and Representative Becker-Finn have done a good job of balancing that in this work. And so I don't like seeing us tinker at this point with numbers like this, and would ask us to reject this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for the bill authors for clarification. Could an employer with less than 5 people opt in even though it's mandatory at 5 or more?
To the authors of the bill.
Madam Chair, I don't believe that the employer could, just the employee.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, Madam Chair, maybe the compromise spot here is 10 or more employers and employers of less than then 10 could choose to opt in if the employer wanted to. That would give more people options. I mean, I tend to agree with what we're hearing, that there's a lot of placeholders out there for a lot of other legislation that small businesses are going to end up having to deal with, and they don't have staffs of attorneys, they don't have personnel to be able to do this. It is the business owner who at night goes and does all the paperwork and does all the payroll and does those kinds of things while they are out in the field, oftentimes working with the rest of the folks who are there. And so if we're talking about being fair to folks, it seems to me that that would be a good way to be able to do this, to bump that number up and then allow others the opportunity, if they want to opt in. And again, the employees that are, have that discretion to opt in, it seems to me to be reasonable at 10 or more.
Authors of the bill.
Thank you for the discussion. I would urge a no vote on the amendment. As I said before, every Minnesotan deserves the ability to retire, whether you work for an employer with 500 employees or 10 employees or 5 employees. And as I said at the beginning, when we went over the initial DE, I think that the 5 is already a compromise. We passed the language in the House that is only at 1. So I think that's a good compromise. I will also say, as a small business owner, I have 9 employees. So this is exactly impacting a business like mine. I own a coffee shop. I have no HR department. I am the HR department. I use a software program. We've got some ramp up to this. It would be, I assume, like any other of our employment taxes and sales taxes and things like that. It would be included when I take on a new employee. I would do the little setup. It's not a lot to ask. It really isn't. And I think, as Senator Murphy mentioned, we toss around the word small business a lot as a reason to do or not do things. This particular amendment only would impact businesses like mine. So here's a business owner right here who would be impacted by this, who is telling you that I don't want this change. I want to be able to offer that to my employees, and I think that I should be able to, and I think that a lot of small businesses would feel that way. Again, small business, the definition shifts with what we want to say, and whether we like New York or not shifts depending upon what argument we're making. But I think this is a good compromise. I think 10 is too high. And was willing to make the compromise to put it at 5, and would again encourage a no vote. Every Minnesotan deserves the ability to retire, no matter who your employer is.
Thank you, Representative Becker-Finn. And Representative Nelson, and then to the author of the amendment, and we will take the vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think Representative Becker-Finn said what I was going to say. The 5 is already a compromise, and similar to conference committees that get together and they have different numbers, they settle on something. They've already done that. I don't think we should be changing what has been worked out as going through. So I would say vote no on this amendment.
Senator Rasmussen. Senator Nelson, and then to Senator Rasmussen.
Madam Chair, I have a question that I'll put out there, but I'm not exactly sure that it's on this amendment. So, no, I think I'll wait until after the amendment's adopted and then put forth my question.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to make clear to commission members that all workers would still be able to opt in to secure choice. My amendment would simply change the mandate for employers. And I think we've understood that there is an administrative burden that comes along with this, and that's why we even see the 5 in the DE. It basically is an acknowledgement that for small businesses, this could perhaps be too large of a mandate. And even if you have 1 employee, that employee can still opt in. And so if Representative Becker-Finn wants her employees to be able to sign up for this, they can still sign up for this. This amendment doesn't change that at all. And I just think it's really important for us, especially as we look at the cumulative effect of perhaps many of these employee mandates that are being pushed this session, that we take this into account. It can always be adjusted earlier. I also, when I take a look at the language, I don't see anything that would prohibit an employer that is smaller than 10 employees or 5 employees from being able to opt in. I believe when I read the responsibilities of covered employers, it just talks to the requirement to enroll employees, but I don't see any language that prohibits them from signing up for it. So I would ask for members to support the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. And I just have maybe one question or comment before we go to the vote is, I know that there are other parts of putting this secured choice with all the parameters it needs in order to execute. And I'm curious if this discussion around the number of employees could be something that, the board or the group or whoever it is that will be, coming together after we pass this, that they could consider it, and if there are revisions that need to be made, that they could be brought to us in the future as a commission. I see our authors shaking their heads. All right, thank you so much for that. And so we are going to go to the vote, seeing that there is no further discussion to the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. No. The motion does not prevail, and the amendment is not adopted. To the bill as amended, I understand that we do have a few testifiers here today. I'm going to go first to Mary Jo George, State Director, Advocacy of AARP, Minnesota. If you can make your way up to the testifiers table and identify yourself. And I will just ask for Bess Kadoon, Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, to be ready right after Ms. George completes her testimony. Please identify yourself.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Mary Jo George, and I'm the Associate State Director of Advocacy for AARP Minnesota. On behalf of our members, we are in strong support of both of these bills that create the Minnesota Secure Choice Retirement Program, and we want to thank our authors for bringing the bill forward. As many of you know, AARP has been working on this bill for many years to ensure more workers can save for their future, and Minnesota can get ahead of our nation's retirement savings crisis. Greater access to workplace retirement plans is the key to help thousands of households build retirement savings and to reduce wealth disparity. In fact, employees are 20 times more likely to save merely by having access to a workplace retirement plan. And now this program has been successfully implemented in other states over the last few years. It is now estimated that there are over 653,000 funded accounts totaling over $700 million across state programs. So we're excited to have Minnesota join the other 12 states that have implemented these easily accessible auto IRA plans. And just for the record, the majority of them, 9 of the states, either do not have an exemption for small businesses, or 5 of them have an exemption of 5 or more. So really, New York and the other states are outliers, and we're finding out that Virginia, that exempts 25 or less employees, is having problems getting private investors to invest in their program. So we do think that this is a really valid compromise. Additionally, we just want to say the benefits of increased retirement savings go beyond the individual savers and their families. According to our research, Minnesota taxpayers can also save millions of dollars in public assistance programs simply by having people save for their retirement. So lastly, we just want to say rebuilding the promise of financial security in retirement does include new expanded options, which is what Secure Choice aims to do. And so we really urge bipartisan support of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. George. Next is Beth Kadoon, and after that is John Reynolds. If you could be ready as well, please identify yourself for the record and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. My name is Beth Kadoon. I'm with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Last time I spoke to this commission was on this bill. We had 3 major concerns. One was on the small business exemption. The bill at that time did not have an exemption. And as been stated, most other states have or have had a much longer implementation to get to the smaller employers. I also testified regarding concerns over the penalty that the non-elected board was going to be imposing a penalty, and I thought there needed to be more legislative oversight. And also concern over the phase-in date and also the cumulative impact, as Senator Rasmussen mentioned. We're seeing other employer mandates being proposed this year. We wanted to make sure the committee took account those other bills that might be coming forward as well. I'd like to thank the authors, for working with us and taking some of our concerns regarding this bill. Do appreciate the small business exemption that has been enacted. We certainly would have appreciated Senator Rasmussen's provision going on at the 10, but we do appreciate movement on that. Also appreciate the bill does took into account the penalty issue, where there's now a warning that's in the bill for the first year, so thank you for that. And also there is now more oversight over the penalty, so I appreciate that change as well. I would suggest that also I'd like to see still some changes on the phase-in date. I think there's still concern. This bill is going to be starting on January 2025 with a 2-year implementation date. There's the other bill, for example, on paid leave has a July 1, 2025 date currently. I think there's still going to be a lot of costs, a lot of confusion for both employees and employers if these other employer mandate bills are implemented. So I'd encourage this board to also look at those other bills and the timeline for implementation, and maybe consider extending that phase-in a little longer, so that would give a little more leeway for the commission when implementing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kadoun. Next is John Reynolds. Please identify yourself for the record and begin.
Thank you, Chair Herr and members of the commission. Appreciate the opportunity to testify. My name is John Reynolds. I'm the State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business. NFIB represents 10,000 small employers in every corner of the state, and our average member employs 10 Minnesotans.
Mr. Reynolds, if you could just move a little closer to the microphone so we can hear you. That'd be
Sorry,
great.
I'm on the edge of my seat here in many ways, Madam Chair. First, I want to thank the authors, and in particular, thanks to Senator Pappas for meeting with us to discuss our concerns. Appreciate her willingness to go to an exclusion of 10 employees, and appreciate the D's inclusion of 5. We are disappointed in the reduction to 5, and would have liked to see the commission agree to 10. There's a lot of reasons why 10 makes sense. It's the threshold that the Congress chose in 2022 in the Secure 2.0 Retirement Act. To trigger automatic payroll deductions for employers who have retirement accounts. Most employers under 10, as is the case with Representative Becker-Finn, don't have HR departments or accountants. Most employers of that size are also not lawyer legislators, so compliance might be a bit more complicated. I've also talked to many of our members who don't use automated payroll systems. And as Senator Rasmussen noted earlier, at an exclusion of 10 employees, 92% of employees in the state would still be covered by the automatic payroll deduction. The remaining 8% could opt in voluntarily. And at 10 employees or less, the total amount of payroll in the state is less than 7%, so it wouldn't have a significant impact on the fund's ability to accumulate a high degree of savings. The top reason most people don't save is the high cost of living. That's the top reason cited by people for not having retirement savings, and that's getting worse. The cost of living is getting worse with inflation, and when we look at the potential tax hikes and fee hikes that are coming this session, we don't see it getting any better either. So thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and again, thank you to the authors for hearing our concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. And I will ask if there are any members of the public who are here that would like to testify that did not sign up ahead of time. Seeing that there are none, I thank you for the testimony today and further discussion on the bill as amended from our members. Representative Nelson.
Madam Chair, I've heard $5 million thrown around here as a number. I'm looking on page 13, 13.24. I see blanks there. And have we, I don't remember us filling those in, so. So I guess I'm asking, what is that where the appropriation is going in? Is that the $5 million that was been talked about? Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. To the authors of the bill.
Madam Chair, I believe the fiscal note is 4.96 million. And I actually don't know how that gets divided up in here. We'd have to ask our fiscal people when we go to Finance and Ways and Means.
Senator Pappas, thank you. Do we have the fiscal note in the packet? Ms. Linczewski.
Thank you, Chair Herr and Senator Pappas and Representative Nelson. The fiscal note is in the package. We are, however, looking at a spreadsheet in just a minute that allocates $5 million to this program. And there can be more discussion at that time, but it is true, it's not filled in yet, but hopefully, eventually here it will be.
Representative Nelson.
That's what I wanted to hear. We don't like sending stuff out with blank appropriations.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. Any further discussion from our members? Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to figure out an example here. Oh, not an example, actually, it's a real case that I'm aware of, and I just am not exactly sure how, if this bill as amended were passed, how it would affect that. And so an employer who offers a SEP plan with 25% contribution for all employees, small employer, just, I don't know, under under 10 for sure, and under 5, would they, let's say, under 5 employees, would they be required to do something different than what they're already doing? Because a 25% contribution to a retirement plan, like a SEP type plan, how would they be affected by this?
Senator Pappas or Representative Becker-Finn?
Madam Chair, I'm not really familiar with an SEP plan. I don't know what that is. And obviously, if you have under 5 employees, you're exempt as a business. Your employees can still participate in secure choice. And if you, as an employer, offer a comparable retirement plan or an opportunity, it really is an IRA of any kind, then you're exempt.
Senator Nelson.
So, Madam Chair, I think that answers my question. I should reframe it. So, yes, according to the plan as amended, it would be an employer who has over 5 employees. Would they be required? And I think the answer might be in of the DE2 in 2.5 and 2.6. A person, these are people who are exempt, on whose behalf an employer makes a contribution to a Taft-Hardy multi-employer pension trust fund. Now, I'm assuming are all IRAs in a Taft-Hardy multi-employer pension trust fund? That's my question.
And Senator Nelson, let me just clarify too for Senator Pappas and Representative Becker-Finn. So this is the world that I used to live in. I used to actually process mutual funds, and that the simples and the SEPs were created back, I think it was like either the late 80s or early 90s for smaller employers who couldn't offer certain types of plans. And so this is for smaller employers. And I want to direct everyone to lines 3.1 and 3.5 that states that because these are programs that were created by Federal Internal Revenue Code, that those are actually exempt from, if you already provide these types of plans, you are actually exempt from this program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was my question.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for the bill authors. If we were to have an unfortunate bear market and the, stocks, bonds were to take a dive, and we have Minnesotans who are looking at their secure choice portfolio and trying to figure out if it's a good time to sell or buy, or they're nervous about that. I was wondering if the bill authors could talk about what advice will be available to them as they're thinking about what decisions they should be making for their retirement as members of this secure choice plan.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. And maybe I could just help provide a little bit of clarification in the industry as well, that when someone actually sets up some of these accounts through whatever mutual fund company they decide, there's always either a financial advisor or someone who is, series licensed in order to give financial advice. And so under this particular plan setup, do we then actually have somebody that if someone is wondering what they should do and they see the market start to change, is there somebody available that is licensed to be able to give them advice on what they could potentially do with their account? I think that is what Senator Rasmussen is asking for, and I don't know if the two of you, one of you have an explanation or a response to that.
Madam Chair, I assume that the board would provide that kind of advice or set up a system where that advice could be provided.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Chair Herr, and I assume it would be similar to what we have as state employees as well. I mean, that's sort of what we're trying to do here is set up an analogous type system that other employees, other workers would be able to access.
And maybe this is a question I can ask Ms. Luncheski, that in some of our DC plans that are not DB, how do they get advice on market changes for state plans that offer DC plans, Ms. Luncheski?
Madam Chair, I would have to defer actually to the plan directors. I don't know if any of them would be able to come up and talk about that.
Do we have any plan directors here that have a DC component of their plans that could potentially answer this question? Ms. Leonard.
I put in the riskiest stuff I can.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Erin Leonard from the Minnesota State Retirement System. We offer the Minnesota Deferred Compensation Plan, which is a 457 plan. The way it works, we have an outside record keeper that individuals who are in the plan can purchase advice services. There's varying levels depending on how they wish to be advised. We have a service center that provides education, not advice, that our state employees that provide that service. So I anticipate that a vendor would have similar options to individuals in this plan.
Thank you, Ms. Leonard. Any follow-up, Senator Rasmussen? Was that your, Senator Rasmussen's question, or was that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I'm just a little concerned that we don't have that more fleshed out at this point, because that is, especially when we're dealing with retail investors, which I think is the goal of this program, is to try to capture some of those who don't have investor accounts, that when there are turns in the market, sometimes individuals can maybe make decisions that would be against the advice of financial advisors. They might not be getting advice on how much they need to be saving for retirement and think, hey, I'm in the secure choice plan, I should be good, there's something coming out of my paycheck, but not understand how much they need to save. And so I'm just concerned that we don't have better answers today on what that advice component could look like. And without proper financial advice, even if there is some savings getting pulled out of individuals' paychecks, it could actually lead to financial decisions that could leave them worse off. And so those are just some of the concerns I'd have today, and just would express those to the commission.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my concerns too. So while this is incredibly well-intended, I think it might have some unintended consequences, which are removing Minnesotans from accessing financial planners in their communities, financial planners, advisors they go to church with, they see in the grocery store, and instead replacing them, if I understood the testimony correctly, by their need to purchase advice from a third-party vendor. And I just can't imagine that that is going to be as accessible or as accountable. And I just don't know that Minnesotans are going to have the choices that they need. I mean, the point of this plan is to increase Minnesotans' retirements. But we know that much has to do with investment over time and what those investments are in. And yet we are taking away unattendedly taking away that option, I think, or I think that's an option that's missing, a piece that's quite missing in this plan today.
Thank you for sharing your concerns, Senator Nelson. And Ms. Leonard, you can go ahead and leave that. I am going to ask Ms. George or Mary Jo George back to the table, because I do want to ask, because if this were, I would say that if this was the first state that was going to be passing this, I would be concerned. But I do know that other states have done this, and I would like to know, since she is the one who referenced what other states have done and what has been successful and what is not, if she could maybe just talk a little, if you are aware of how other states actually deal with advising or providing education on how to invest, if you could maybe share some of that. And if you don't have that information, you can just feel free to say you don't have it either. Thank you, Ms. George.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Mary Jo George with ARP. It's my understanding, that the state will contract out with a vendor, and that vendor would be responsible for providing that sort of information. Imagine, look at how we do the 529 college plan in the state. When I enrolled in that, the state, if I had concerns about my money, I was able to call them, and there was staff support to be able to, answer my questions in Service Center. And I think to Senator Nelson's point, we're not, I don't know about whether or not they would contract out for the services for financial advice, but I don't think we're trying to take away anybody's ability to hire their own financial planner. I don't want you to be under that impression, because this really is a simple auto IRA plan, and the vendors do provide, the services that people need. The board has to come up with explicit information in the bill that provides the program overview, and the risks and the amount of money people can, contribute, the maximum contribution limits. So I just don't think we're trying to get away, trying to cut out, financial planners if people actually hire them. But I do have to say, as much as we say people are gonna go, we can have people opt into this program at any time, we know from data that they don't. Only 5% of people purchase their own individual plans. And the key is access to a workplace retirement where there's an automatic enrollment feature. And so that's why we don't want to go with too high of an exemption for employers. And that's where we're seeing success in these other programs, is the key feature of the auto enrollment.
Thank you, Ms.
So
George.
I
I'm going
went
to go
on
to
a little
Representative
bit.
Becker-Finn and then, let them do some closing, and then I do have a comment as well. So Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, and I think in response to the last line of questioning, there's nothing in this bill that keeps you from talking to your friend at church who's a financial planner or any of the other ways that folks I know, like as a lawyer, sometimes people just ask you questions or, there's nothing that stops you from seeking that advice from the people in your life. That isn't any different than it is for any other state worker right now, or for those of us in this room who have state employment or state retirement as our jobs as legislators. In closing, thank you, Chair Herr, for lifting up this bill and for your background has certainly been very helpful as we move this forward. And again, every Minnesotan deserves the ability to retire. It should not matter who your employer is. Every Minnesotan deserves the ability to retire. There was a comment about not every small business owner is a lawyer legislator. Well, I'm sure not every small business owner is trapped at the House floor until 5:30 a.m. either. So I'm not sure that necessarily is a something that's in the favor of other small businesses. That is an extra bonus that I have as a small business owner. No worker is required to participate. If it sounds too risky to them or they don't want to do it, nobody's making them do it. Finally, this will cost employers nothing other than the small amount of time that it takes to set this up. And the thing to remember is if you have fewer than 10 employees, the number of employees that you have coming on at any given time is really little. It's not like I've got 10 new employees I have to process every week. It's a really small number of people, and I think the couple minutes it's gonna take to ask that one additional question of asking folks, you wanna participate in this, and typing in a couple of numbers is not too much to ask, so that all employees can be covered here in Minnesota. So really appreciate the discussion. Again, this is already a compromise. This is already a little bit weaker than I would like to see it be, but understand that working across the aisle that we've got that number at 5, and I think it's a good bill, and we should all feel good about moving it forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Becker-Finn. Senator Pappas, any closing remarks?
I think Representative Becker-Finn said it all.
Thank you. And I will just add really quick that I know that there was a comment that was made about the reason why people don't save is because of cost of living. And I will just say that I don't know if I generally believe that to be true. I mean, when I graduated college in 1997, and in those terms, even back then, I made $19,800. But because my first job was in retirement, I started saving at 21. And I stopped saving when I became a stay-at-home mom in my 30s, and my husband didn't start saving, even though he does institutional investments. He did not listen to his own advice. He didn't start saving until his late 20s, early 30s. And it took him all of those years that I was a stay-at-home mom to actually catch up to me, and still now he is still catching up to me. So I think that it is so critically important that we give people the tools so that they can invest, because that time value of money, that compounding really matters. And so the fact is that as women, especially for women and people of color who don't come from backgrounds of institutional investment, my people lived in the mountains of Laos. We did not have a concept of investments or bank, right? And so us, even though we've been in the United States for 45 years, we actually are still learning on how to build wealth, how to pass on that wealth, to have generational wealth. And that it starts with something as small as having an account when you are 21 years old and putting, I mean, literally after taxes, I made $600 a pay period, and putting that money away 10% at that time. And yes, the cost of living was still, what it is, but I was able to save. And so we have to give people the tools to be able to do that. And like all things, I so appreciate Senator Rasmussen and Senator Nelson's questions, because same in the industry, that we're constantly finding when it is that the industry actually hurts people and when it helps them. And that, like this bill, we will continue to work on it to ensure that the outcome of what we want is actually what we get. And so I really appreciate the robust discussion. And the reason why we gave it such a thorough hearing today is that we are still trying to figure out the path for this bill. And I want to make sure that if the bill gets wrapped up in the omnibus and it is not moved on its own, that we all know that we had thorough discussion on this bill. And so I really appreciate everyone's conversation today. And so with that, I will move that House File 782, Senate File 413 as amended, be recommended to be approved, that recommendation be forwarded to the House and Senate Committees of Jurisdiction. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay.
No.
The motion prevails and the recommendation is adopted. Thank you, Senator Pappas and Representative Becker-Finn. And our next item of business will be presentation and discussion of the pensions omnibus finance bill spreadsheet. I know all of you are very excited to hear about secured choice, but I'm sure that many of you are here actually for this particular piece of the commission hearing. And before I turn it over to have Ms. Linczewski walk us through the draft budget spreadsheet, I do just want to ground us in the discussion today. I will note that since our budget target was announced, the staff and leadership at the LCPR has been working tirelessly to come up with a series of equitable funding proposals that seek to balance funding across actives and retirees, as well as across all of our pension plans. As Executive Director Linczewski will go over some of these, and you might see why is it that some we are making actual recommendations for and others we are giving options, and we will actually talk through those as we move through this bill. But I want to ground us in how this budget was developed. We looked at if the target should be allocated by plan asset size, funded ratio, or accrued liability. I looked at the plan and thought, well, should we allocate more funds if you have more assets? And it made me think about, well, then do plans that have more assets actually have employees who have higher pay? Do they? So there were a lot of things that we were sort of weighing to say, is what how we actually split up this $600 million target, how do we equitably even say who gets what portion of it? We tried to balance the needs of active members versus retired members. We looked at individual bills and which plans benefited from them. As you'll see, there's certain carve-outs for those bills so that we don't disproportionately give more to those who might already be getting something through an individual bill. We looked at how different groups might have benefited for contributions made in other bills, such as omnibus bills for public safety, for education, for judiciary, health, state gov, taxes, and the governor's proposal to fully fund state departments to assess ways in which active and retired members might be impacted. We looked into considerations of all of the feedback from different stakeholders and groups. I asked for, and I'd like to remind everyone, I asked for $3.3 billion in the target, and what we were given is $600 million in one-time money. Despite how disappointing this figure is, I want to remind all of us that this is the highest pension target we have ever received. We held true the commitment in this budget that everyone made to not make structural changes unless we had ongoing money to fund those changes. We tried to give options that would keep the plan healthy and costs down. And with that, we did the best that we could with what we had. And I want to assure everyone here today that I'm continued to be committed to working with all of you, because my goal in getting this budget out early was that then I could actually still meet with all of you to say, what would you like me to do? And I'm going to actually come meet with me and tell me what you would like to see, with the caveat in that don't come to me and tell me you don't like what I did. Come to me and then tell me, who do you want to take money from so that I could give it to you? Because that's what is actually going to be happening, is who do I have to take these funds from in order to give you what you would like to see? So unless you come to me with who you want to take that money from, don't tell me where you want to see more money for yourself. And so I know that that feels really harsh, but the truth is that that is actually what we're balancing here. And then I would love for us to also think about, if I am already getting money from fully funding education, or if I'm an active member and departments are being fully funded, what would that look like for me, and what would be fair? And so I'm asking us to not just look at our piece here in pension, but to say in totality, with what is happening with the surplus that we have, what can be done and what would be fair. And so I know that I've said a lot, but I wanted to really ground us in how we did this, that this commission has been extremely thoughtful. And every member of this commission has come to me to give me their thoughts. I spoke with Representative O'Driscoll ahead of time, Representative Doe and I've spoken. Representative Rasmussen has shared his proposals with me. I've talked to stakeholders. I've really taken in as much as I possibly can. I tried to honor as many people as I could in this work. And Senator Frentz, I want to just say he has been a true champion in making sure that different perspectives of individuals have been heard, and has been bringing those to me if they haven't come to me already. And so I want to let everyone know that this was not done and was not taken lightly. It was really important for us to try to get this right, knowing that there's more that all of us would love to do for every single one of you, but this is the best that we could do. So with that, I'm going to have Ms. Linczewski walk through the spreadsheet so that we all understand what is on that, and then we could have member discussions around it. Thank you so much. Ms. Linczewski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very quickly, I want to note at the outset that there were two assumptions that were made before allocating numbers and determining how much certain benefit changes would cost. And that is that the 7.5 rate of return assumption would go from 7.5 to 7%. So that was baked into this analysis here that's on the spreadsheet. The other is that we would keep the amortization end date at 2048 rather than increase it, say, to 2053, as has been suggested by TRA. So just to start very quickly here with going through the spreadsheet, the easiest way for me to understand this is to go to the end of the spreadsheet. So at the end, in the lower right-hand corner, you will see that there are 4 boxes. So we took 600 million and then took off the top, starting with the 5 million for secure choice. And again, I'm on the lower right-hand part of the spreadsheet. 100 million, that goes to the bill HF 1234 SF 1959. This is the PTSD bill, as we've been calling it. It has benefits for police and fire and state patrol in the form of some additional treatment for PTSD, as well as some changes to the disability statutes for both MSRS and para. Then we have 5 million for the firefighters. These are for volunteer firefighters to provide some additional money for those who are getting the least amount of state aid. And then there's sort of a buffer or slush fund or whatever you want to call it, some additional money here so that if any of these costs come in as higher than we expect, that there is some additional money here to allocate toward those items. Going back to the top of the spreadsheet then, so what we have left after we take off those 4 boxes, we have $470.4 million to allocate. We then took out the COLA cost. So the cost for the governor's COLA then runs across the top, and really the second row here. So these are allocated again on the basis of the cost of the COLA, and this is the one-time 2.5% COLA that the governor had in his budget proposal. That then is, you can see the costs are allocated among all the pension plans. The one plan that doesn't get any additional money there is the local government correctional plan, and that's because they are already at 2.5%. So it's a one-time COLA. It would go back to what it currently is, 1% for most of the plans after 1 year. That's 78 million. Then going down next to the MSRS plans, the starting assumption was that they would all just get a cash infusion, so a one-time lump sum amount of money into the funds. There were some requests from the MSRS executive director, or at least I should say, rather there were some suggestions on how certain things could be funded if we wanted to do that. And you'll see there that there's a $34.3 million cost, and this is on the left-hand side of the spreadsheet, to buy down for 2 years the employee contributions. This would be for the general plan. And then there is a one-time cash infusion of 10 million to help the MSR State Patrol Plan with some disability costs that they're seeing. And then finally, there is a, as you can see here, there is the remainder, which is then a direct state aid into the fund. For para, you'll see here that was entirely the use of the money, so 148 billion for para, split between the general plan and the local government correctional plan. The police and fire do not see this money, this one-time lump sum, because they are getting the 100 million that we talked about earlier on at the bottom of the spreadsheet. For TRA, so under TRA's heading here, we have 3 options. We were not able to cover the cost of the proposal from the TRA Board of Trustees. So you can see here the first option, Rule of 90 adjustment. In order to provide for the age 62 and 30-year benefit and reduce the normal retirement age from 66 to 65, we would do a one-time lump sum of 145 million. And then there would also have to be an employee contribution increase of 1.9%. That would be for all time. So it would be an annual cost that would have to be paid by the employees. We did the same thing for St. Paul teachers. So whatever's being done for TRA here in the bill, all benefit improvements and funding is similarly being done for St. Paul teachers. So that's one scenario. The second scenario is to provide funding for a buy-down of employee contributions. This is similar to what we talked about earlier in the MSRS general plan. This would be a 2-year buy-down, so there would be a 1.3% reduction in the employee contribution rate, and then it would go back up to what it is now. That's 145 million and 7.8 for St. Paul teachers. And then the final scenario is what we have done for some of the other plans, which is just simply a direct state aid into TRA and St. Paul teachers to help pay for their underfunding. Those are the three options, and, Chair Herr and others here can talk about why those three were chosen here, but you can see they each have costs for TRA and St. Paul teachers that the target just simply did not permit us to fund in full.
Thank you, Ms. Lynchesky. And I understand that the Senate does have caucus at 9:30, is that correct? And so what we can do is since we are not taking any votes today, we can loop back with our senators and walk through any questions that you may have specifically to this budget spreadsheet. We have a week to sort of work on this, so if you all need to leave, just know that please feel free to do so according to your schedule. Thank you. Did you have any questions before? I'll let you, the senators have questions before we move forward. Senator Rasmussen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one quick question and comment, but before I get into that, I just wanted to thank you for having the spreadsheet be available and having this early discussion, and I think for soliciting input from all commission members. I think there's things that each of us probably like on here and things that we don't, but I just appreciate the process that you've taken throughout all this. The one, I would say, thing that I look at that jumps out to me is on the back side that says no cost or absorbable cost, remove delay and start of COLAs scheduled to begin on January 1st, 2024 for all pension plans. I just would like to have a little more information on what that cost is. It's my understanding that that's actually a pretty expensive benefit improvement. And so I just, starting from the principle of making sure that we pay for these benefit improvements, I appreciate those that are on the spreadsheet. It's my understanding that they largely are paid for, but that was just one thing I wanted to flag for the commission to think about over the next coming days.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Senator Howe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What is when I look at the MSRS, the State Patrol plan, it looks like we're taking 7.9 million. Why is that a reduction, and where does that come from, and how does that play?
So what we looked at that, so we were told by MSRS that they needed $10 million for a lump sum payment to shore up the state patrol duty disability incurred. And so that was from the initial allocation, and when we looked at how much should each plan get, and so since we were going to be giving them 10th, we're saying we're moving that 7.9 million from general into state patrol. So that 10 million includes that 7.9 million. It was just so that we could see what was shifting to total that $10 million. I know it's a little bit confusing. I asked that question yesterday too when I saw that. But in the end, what we're saying is we're just shifting from general over into the state patrol plan so that they get the 10 million they need. Ms. Lynchesky, did I state that correctly?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Senator Howe, that we had started, as we allocated, we did it on the basis of accrued liability. And so general would have gotten more, but there was not enough there to fund this 10 million for the correctional, or for the state patrol. So there was just a shift. So, Madam Chair.
I guess I'm still struggling. So really, if you're taking 7.9 mil away and you're giving them 10 mils, so they're really getting 2.1?
The state patrol is getting 10 because the state patrol's plan is outside of the general. So we're just moving the money for the 7 million from the general because the general, that way, otherwise, if we weren't making the shift, the general would actually be more by 7.9%.
Got it.
Yeah. Any other questions from our senators who may need to leave? Thank you. All right, so I'm going to open this up. Actually, we're going to go to some testimonies, testifiers today. And I do just want to note for our testifiers that some of you had reached out to me ahead of time, and we have already made adjustments based on some of the things that we heard. So one of those is dealing with the trigger and what it means if there is a change in Social Security benefits and how that may look like. So just understand that we have heard many of you, and we've already started making some adjustments to that. And so we will go ahead and begin with our testifiers. And the first person on the list is Brian Rice. And on deck is Luis Sandin. And Luis, if you just want to go up there and sit next to him, and that way we can rotate people through quickly, that would be great. Please identify yourself for the record and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian Rice. I'm appearing this morning on behalf of the Minnesota Police Fraternal Association, a group of almost 1,000 retired police officers and their widows and the Minnesota Professional Firefighters. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Just quickly, one of the big issues has been COLAs. There was a 2021 Pension Commission study that showed that the current COLAs were not adequate when we assumed a 2.5% inflation. Inflation is now 20% if you take the last 3 years of 21, 22, and what looks to be, those were 7% a year, and it's likely going to be 6% this year. We really need some COLA relief. I'm glad that you mentioned it. The most concern on the spreadsheet is the box, the additional comment on Social Security or pension subtraction. These public employees in the basic plans that are 25,000 year retirees are already discriminated against on their income. In 2016 and 2018, the legislature granted a preference to people with Social Security. They did not do that to basic plan members. We have a bill in this session to fix that, to just level the playing field that they've been discriminated for 7 years now. It's just not fair. To remove a COLA for them, it just rubs salt into a very, very deep wound. The second point is that if there is Social Security expansion, all that income should be treated the same, and so we hope that you fix that issue. I know time's brief. I will make one other big comment. I included a memo that said, I think this commission, and you, Madam Chair, more than anyone, knows how hard it is to get money for these plans. There was a very excellent memo that the Pension Commission staff did just a year ago explaining these special state aids. I really think now would be the time to eliminate those 100% triggers, make those funds permanent, get those funds under the committee's jurisdiction so that as the future goes on, if some plans do well or there's changes and you can move this money around, it's really, really difficult to do this. If you roll the clock back to the 80s and 90s, the commission had this kind of authority. I always worked with former Chair Mary Murphy to do that, and so I hope you would consider that as part of your budget. I know your time's valuable. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rice, and I always appreciate your feedback and your comment. It's very helpful. Ms. Sundin is next, and then David Johnson, if you can make your way up to the table as well. Ms. Sundin, please identify yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you. It looks like Brother Rice cleared the clear side of the table. Madam Chair, Commission members, I'm Louise Sundin, representing 8,000 committee of 13 members, active and retired educators in the Minneapolis schools. Thank you for going a long way to pull back the penalties for the actives from the 2018 shared sacrifice that went too far. What also went too far in retrospect were the sacrifices and the retirees made by accepting no increase for years that we'll never get back, and now crawling up a tiny little ladder of 0.1% towards a 1.5% COLA eventually. In spite of the fact that inflation, of course, is eating us alive. It's very personal to me and emotional for me because I have haunted these halls for a lot of years and a lot of education and pension advocacy. I remember the mid-'80s when we had to ask for special help when then retirees, due to raging inflation, were in the eating cat food idea. I remember in the 1989 freight train bill, so named because everyone was brought forward, including my dad's teacher pension that was raised to the floor of respectability of $11,000 a year. But I never felt as heartsick as I feel today. Remember, I always remind you that we're 75% women, a high percentage of single heads of household. Exactly half of us have no Social Security at all or have been penalized every month and year of our retirement. In spite of contributing lots into Social Security and contributing twice as much to our pensions as current educators are, it's personal because half of Minneapolis and St. Paul retirees, 4,300 of the public employees statewide, are in this penalty box. The half of us who are receiving no Social Security or only bare minimum are shopping at Aldi's, gassing up at Costco, watching AARP free movies for grown-ups online as we try to absorb the cost increases of everything in our lives, particularly insurance, meds, and paying others to help us, like shoveling and chopping ice. So the active half of our shared constituents make progress while retirees, especially us old basic members, go backwards. The half that's been trying for years to be heard and understood about being penalized are further penalized now by taking away the little scheduled progress in their pensions when and if, big if, they get a very tiny accommodation on their taxes. By taking away our 1.1% COLA that everyone else will get isn't fair or just or necessary. I just don't get it. I thought only the Lord could giveth and taketh away. Both actives and retirees taught our students that a promise is a promise and promises should be kept. Please revisit your pension study of 2020 and reread your own pension principles. Doing pensions on the cheap that Brother Rice talks about has now become doing pensions by takebacks. That isn't keeping our pensions up to the level that we, when we retired, and it's not principled. Finally, we need to keep great teachers in the classrooms and thank the retirees who stay in Minnesota and live, volunteer, and keep your communities thriving. They have huge remaining unmet needs. Taking away a shared sacrifice of 1.1% COLA doesn't pass a fairness or justice test. Please help those who just want to be treated like all other similar employees and not punish them further. I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Linden. David Johnson, if you could identify yourself, and up after you is Dr. Michael Landers.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Dave Johnson. I represent MMRA. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee and staff for your work on this budget spreadsheet. Obviously, disappointed that there's no long-term COLA help for para-general members, especially basic members, but understand it is very difficult with one-time money to do long-term pension reforms and appreciate that that's not a decision that was made in this room. Would like to also thank you for your comments about working on the Social Security piece that Mr. Rice indicated. That will shorten my testimony a little bit. But I'm here to speak with respect to the para-general allocation of one-time money and have the following observations. In 2013, significant pension reform was done by the commission. Our MMRA did an actuarial analysis and found that retirees paid 66% of the cost, roughly, of those reforms in the form of a 1% COLA over a decade. In contrast, employers paid about 9% of the cost. So since then, over the last decade, retirees have significantly shouldered a burden that we believe has led to the COLA studies finding that there's been an erosion in the purchasing power of their pensions, which is a pension commission principle. As you know, the COLA study found that without changes, public employees can expect significant erosion in their pension over the next 20 years. Basic plan members can anticipate a 36% erosion in their purchasing power of their pension, coordinated plan members 20%. And this assumed a 2.5% rate of inflation. Inflation in the last 2 years has been more than double that. In this environment, it feels there could be a fairer allocation of one-time money between retirees and the amount that para-general is just going to put into the fund, which in our view primarily benefits employers and the fund. Currently, the spreadsheet says 12% for the retirees and 88% for the fund. We believe, for example, within the constructs of the targets you've given, that you could expand on the WALS proposal to provide a bigger one-time benefit. I would note that for a basic plan member with an average pension benefit of around $39,000, currently the 1% increase would be a benefit of about $350 to $390 for most of our members. And while that's something, it's in this environment very difficult to think that's sufficient. So we think one option is you could expand on the WALS benefit or make it a 2-year benefit, one-time benefit, call it an inflation adjustment. Even if you doubled the Walls proposal and did it for 2 years, that would cost 72 million, leaving more than 90 million for the para general fund. And that's about a swing of 56 million. And again, I'm just throwing out an example because you asked for how to do it. And $56 million in one-time money for para general, against a backdrop of a $27 billion fund, feels like whatever adverse impact from a fairer allocation of the money would be more than offset by trying to provide a meaningful inflation-related adjustment, even if it is for a year or two, for those retirees who, as Ms. Sundin and Mr. Rice noted, have been very heavily impacted. So
Mr.
with that-
Johnson, if you could wrap up,
Yep,
please.
I will. So with that, thank you. Look forward to working with you as this proposal moves through the process and appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Dr. Michael Landers, and after that is Caitlin Schneider. And if you could keep your testimonies succinct and to 3 minutes, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, commission staff, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you here today. My name is Mike Landers. I spent 27 years as a finance specialist with the Minnesota Department of Education and as a member of MAPE. I'm here today on behalf of the Minnesota Retired State Employees Association, representing all levels of state employees that are retired throughout the state of Minnesota and beyond. MRSEA appreciates the work of the commission. The draft budget spreadsheet provides needed relief for the active members. It provides needed funding for the pension legislation for police and fire. My father and grandfather were professional firefighters in the big city fire department. My uncle and godfather was a police sergeant and president of the police association in that same city. I know firsthand how important it is to recruit and retain the brave men and women who serve in these positions. The draft budget spreadsheet also provides one-time, non-compounding, 2.5% improvement to retirees' COLAs, and it adds funding to accomplish these provisions. These are important improvements. However, the draft budget spreadsheet still leaves significant unmet needs. The COLA study required by the 2018 pension bill showed inflation caused a significant loss in purchasing power over a retiree's lifetime, thereby eroding the value of our pensions. And that was before the current surge in inflation, which doesn't have any end in sight. I retired in 2015. When I add up the differences between my pension COLA and the annual rate of inflation between 2017, the first year I was eligible for a COLA, and 2022, the difference is 15.2% over this 6-year period. As of this month, the rate of inflation is 6%, and if that continues, that'll add another 5% to over 19% in a 7-year period, difference between our COLAs and inflation. I spoke earlier how important retention and recruitment is. Pensions are more than just a promise for a dignified, fulfilling retirement. Pensions are also a recruitment and retention tool. As the value of our pensions are eroded due to the ravages of inflation, so too is the effectiveness of pensions as a recruitment and retention tool. So we want to thank the Commission for all its work. We want to let the Commission members know that we see the draft budget spreadsheet as a good beginning, and we want to encourage you to work with other decision-making bodies in the state, in state government, to provide more relief from the ravages of inflation that are significantly eroding the value of our pensions. And you asked where the money should come from. I would point out that Minnesota is 46th in the nation in terms of government contributions to pensions as a percentage of all state and local government and general spending.
Dr. Landers, if you could wrap up your testimony, please.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you here today.
Thank you. Caitlin Schneider. And after that is Devin Bruce. If you could just go up to the table and be ready, that would be greatly appreciated. Please identify yourself for the record and begin your testimony.
Madam Chair and members of the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement, my name is Caitlin Snyder. I am a lobbyist with Education Minnesota. We represent 86,000 active and retired teachers across the state. On behalf of our retired members, thank you for your consideration of the increased cost of living adjustment payments. This is a small portion of the inflation hitting our members' pocketbooks, but we appreciate the consideration and commitment to the LCPR principle on maintaining the purchasing power for retirees. On behalf of our active membership, really the only option that even comes close to meeting the needs is scenario one. At a minimum, almost 3,000 Education Minnesota members have sent almost 9,000 emails to their legislators and the governor asking for a lower normal age of retirement. So I'm sure you have heard how high a priority this is for members in your district. We appreciate the work you have put into this proposal, and educators will see it as a step in the right direction. That being said, this brings the contribution rate for our TRA members to 9.66 and even higher for our St. Paul TRA members. This will be a hardship on our teachers, especially those just starting their careers. Keeping teachers in the classroom during the early stages of their career is vital. 1 out of 3 teachers leaves in the first 5 years of teaching, and the number is even higher for teachers of color and Indigenous teachers. We are facing a teacher shortage, and we need strong pensions as a recruiting tool to attract more people into the profession. I also must note how this is funded solely on the backs of workers. The 2018 legislation removed or lowered a number of employee side benefits, including COLA increases, deferred augmentation, while raising employee contribution rates. The employer side contributions increased, yes, but this was paid for by the state. Again, Minnesota is saying you're in this alone. Furthermore, you're not following regular order or the principles of the LCPR. Principle 3A says benefits should be financed on a shared basis between the public employer and the employee. The TRA pension fund brought you a recommendation where 75% of the cost would be borne by the employers. Instead, you have flipped this and only employees would pay for this increase. Our members are already paying a disproportionate amount towards their pension compared to other states and compared to the state investment. This will be particularly hard on new teachers who will have to pay almost 10% of their paycheck to retirement for at least 30 years to earn this benefit. Please know that we will continue to fight for the next 2 months or the next 2 years, however long it takes, to keep the money in the pocket of workers. I have heard concerns in this commission about the funding levels of the pension fund. Please keep in mind that every year as we lose teachers to private employers, this also hurts the pension fund. When 4,000 teachers leave and are replaced by half that number, this hurts the pension fund. It hurts our students and it hurts those who remain in our schools as they again have to do more with less. Please continue to urge your leadership to invest in public employees and to meet the LCPR principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schneider. And I would ask, I'm going to step a little bit out of my procedure here, but I would ask that if you could come back with a proposal of where the cost of that would come from the state, since we have no ongoing money. Even if I would have given the whole $600 million, it would never have covered this cost of a couple of billions of dollars. So I don't need you to answer now. I'd like for you to think about that and come back to us as to what that would look like, and that the state could come up with something, but it can't. There's no additional funding for that. So if you could just think about that and come back to me, I would greatly appreciate that. Mr. Bruce, please go ahead and identify yourself and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. For the record, my name is Devin Bruce. I'm the Public Affairs Coordinator for the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees, MAPE. First, we would like to just cover a couple things for the MSRS and the TRA proposals. But to begin, the $600 million one-time target is a serious achievement in itself, and we'd like to thank Chair Herr and leadership for pushing the administration to provide this, even if it is one time. In regards to the MSRS proposal, we truly appreciate and generally support Director Leonard's and yours, Madam Chair, approach to applying the improvements on both active and retirees on an equitable basis. While we had hoped to see the increase to the correctional employee multiplier provided in this, we understand the limited resources before us. As conversations continue on both this proposal and some of the other global targets, we ask that the Commission consider making the 0.5% employee contribution shift to the employer permanent so that agencies would be able to incorporate it into their base operating budgets. This would also not preclude future direct appropriations by the legislature and by the Commission to covering the future costs to the employer. Regarding the TRA proposals, our members would definitely prefer something closer to the option 2, as the benefit, albeit temporary, would be shared by both actives and retirees. While option 1 attempts to deliver on a benefit approved by the TRA board and its members, placing the entire ongoing costs onto the employees after the first biennium is unacceptable. And we'll also increase the contribution rates for our IRAP members because it is indexed without receiving a comparable benefit. We hope that if this route is the one that's chosen, we see a rebalancing of the contributions that will make it more equitable for all the affected employees. We look forward to continuing the conversation around how best to use this money and any additional general fund money that might be later available if the Senate passes a bonding bill. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. And up next is Michael Nelson. And on deck is Ethan Vogel. If you can just both make your way up to the testifiers table. Please identify yourself, Mr. Nelson, for the record, and begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chair, here, members. I'm Michael Nelson, a now retired 40-year employee of the state of Minnesota and currently Vice President of AFSCME Minnesota Chapter 5, Retirees United, and its 4,000 plus active members and the thousands more public employees that we advocate for. I'd like to thank the House leadership for including a $600 million infusion to the budget of the Minnesota Public Employee Retirement Systems. This proposed infusion goes in the right direction in minimizing the impact on the systems if a lower return assumption is adopted, but it does little, if anything, to protect the erosion of pension value for those current member recipients of the plans. In 2018, we made a shared sacrifice, limiting our increases to a rate below that of inflation to bring our plans into conformity to bring most to full funding by a specified date. In addition, the legislated increases in prior years have also fallen far short of inflation. As I remember, a recent commission study recommended, in addition to a concern with the plan's funding status, that the plans maintain the benefit to recipients that would maintain the value of the benefit. This clearly hasn't happened and cannot happen without a significant increase of funds in the system. We understand the limitations in this current budget. It's my recollection that the recommendation of that study was that the funds could be restored to fully funded status on a current basis through a combination of employer-employee contributions similar to what was provided for in the 2018 agreement, and that additional state dollars should be provided to the plans for increases necessary to maintain the value of the provided benefit. For years, we've been advised that retirement funding is a three-legged stool consisting of Social Security benefits, our pension benefits, and individual savings and investments. Let me say now that my stool is leaning precariously near to tipping. Social Security, through their statutory formula linked to CPI, has somewhat retained most of its value. But both the pension leg and, to an even greater extent, the savings and investment legs have grown shorter and shorter. A smaller group of our constituency, those who are recipients of the basic plan pensions, are treated even less fairly in the proposal. As stated in the notes section, if these recipients are offered any relief in the tax bill, the plan intent appears to be reduce the amount of their pension by the amount of the relief provided in the other bill. Seems a case of what one hand gives, the other hand takes. Hardly a fair resolution to a long-standing problem that's negatively impacted this particular subset of retirees. For many years, we've funded benefits on the cheap by not providing adequate resources to the plans to maintain the value of the pension benefit. I retired 8 years ago, and a quick back-of-the-envelope calculation indicates that the value of my pension has decreased by 12 to 15%.
Mr. Nelson, if you could wrap up your
That's one paragraph left here. And my savings investment leg by nearly 20% is hardly encouraging. You have the opportunity to lengthen the pension leg of the stool by following your own study recommendations and move Minnesota pensions from the bottom of the barrel to improve the plans, to allow the plans to provide increases to plan recipients and beneficiaries that maintain the value of the benefit. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. And I will just let the commission and members who are here know that it is 10 o'clock and we have about 15 minutes left of testifiers. And so if the commission is all right with it, we're going to go over on our time. If you do need to leave, I know this is a tough time of session right now, and if you need to leave for other commitments, this session is broadcasted and recorded, and we will continue to have discussions around this for those who are not here. But I will have to point, I think I might be the most important person to be here, so it's okay if others leave. But with that, Mr. Vogel, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and on deck is Tim Moynihan, if you could make your way up to the table.
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commission members. My name is Ethan Vogel. I serve as Legislative Director for AFSCME Council 5, and I'm appearing here today on behalf of both the Public Employee Pension Coalition and AFSCME Council 5. First, on behalf of the Public Employee Pension Coalition, commonly referred to as PEPC, we want to recognize all of the early work that has gone into this spreadsheet and other proposals before the Commission, and really thank you and your staff for prioritizing a pension funding bill this session. The inclusion of the $600 million in the joint budget targets that was announced last week was very exciting. It's a good step, a good first step in the right direction, but this one-time funding compared to all of the needs that we're asking you to address doesn't quite stack up. The state has been getting by doing pensions on the cheap, as Brian Rice says, underfunding pensions for a very long time, and our work today would be much easier if the actuarially required contribution rates would have been maintained over time. Yes, since the 2018 bill, the funding trajectories have improved, but again, this has not been because the state has ponied up their fair share of funding. It's been a burden disproportionately on active and retired members. Active members are paying more, they're retiring later, and other benefit cuts were included in that bill. And of course, the retirees' COLAs are not keeping up with inflation. Their purchasing power, as you've heard, has been diluted significantly over time. And compared to other states, Minnesota's active public employees are paying far more than their fair share to subsidize this history of underfunding, and the purchasing power of retirees has also gone downhill. The problem and the solution are both very clear. The state needs to contribute more. We're grateful for the $600 million in one-time funding, but in order to make these bonding bill, that cash target could be used to bolster our target here. Again, Pepsi also supports making the current state aids permanent. I see in your spreadsheet that that is a temporary extension. We hope that that could just be a permanent. This change will ensure we continue to make progress toward adequate and sustainable funding from the state. Now, speaking on behalf of AFSCME, again, we appreciate all of the work behind these proposals, but we do have concerns with how the proposals would be a divergence from our goal of having a uniform public pension plans. If PARA gets to just absorb the whole cost, if TRA changes retirement age, MSRS reduces reductions, that's a divergence from what we'd like to see consistency across all plans. We hope to see benefit increases for both active members and retirees, and we want these benefit improvements to be consistent and long-term across our public pension plans. The desire for lowering the retirement age is shared across public sector employees who have dedicated their entire careers to public service. And again, we're grateful for the $600 million. We understand the constraints you've been working within, but and it's a major step in the right direction, and it's a prerequisite really to making the meaningful and permanent changes we hope to see. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vogel. Next is Tim Moynihan, and on deck is Jay Stoffel. Please identify yourself for the record and begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commission members. My name is Timothy Moynihan, and I'm Vice President and Legislative Co-Chair of Retired Educators Association, Minnesota. My first message to you this morning is one that you've heard a lot. You've received it in testimony from active public servants, their advocates, and those who are charged with managing their pension funds. You've heard testimony in person and in writing from hundreds of retirees who served many years in service of our state. Thousands more have signed petitions on social media platforms appealing to their governmental leaders to change direction. Then excitement came with the news of the historic budget surplus. It brought many hope that Minnesota could afford to take a new course with its pensions, allowing us to reshape pension benefits, redefine retirement rules, and to deliver a, quote, adequate pension income, unquote, for present and future retirees. Hope. Passionate, active public employees were trumpeting their expectations to you. At the same time, as were retired public employees. That too is historic. All right, let's address the spreadsheet proposals. And frankly, it has public pension stakeholders wondering what happened. The target amount has landed far short of what is needed. Short-term benefit gains come alongside raises in contribution rates for actives and are connected to possible taxation relief where one happens, but not both. We know that the target amount can only go so far. Needs identified in the 2021 COLA study by this commission has defined that for you. There are pension shortcomings. This budget, this plan, does little to meet those needs. We ask that we all remember that current Minnesota law directs our pensions to collect well above the U.S. average from members and delivers less of retirement income in return. Pension members will pay for their pension while working 40 years before they can collect it. Minnesota, you heard about its ranking, 46 in the nation. Right here, we have listened to actuarials who tell us that we must lower our assumed rate of return. And yet, we set aside the actuarial required contribution rates. They tell us every year we must pay in to keep our pension funds thriving. We
Mr.
propose to you
Moynihan, if you could
today
wrap up your testimony.
that it will be more beneficial to allocate the 600 million target to be invested by the SBI. There it would better enrich Minnesota's investments and thus our pensions. We would also propose that you put it in law that the ARC must be paid into our funds each and every year. Fully funding our pensions allows Minnesota to offer better benefits. Many states have in law that the ARC, actuarial required contribution, must be paid. With record surplus dollars at our disposal, we can do better. As we have long said, that if we are to attract the best and brightest to our public workforce, we must do better. Please send the word to the governor, the leaders of your caucus and committees. The time has come to invest in pensions. We are here with you. We ask you, lead us in this effort. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Moynihan. Next is Jay Stoffel, and on deck is Philip Tensick.
Morning, Madam Chair and members. My name is Jay Stoffel. I'm the Executive Director of the Teachers Retirement Association. And we, again, want to express our appreciation, Madam Chair, for all your work in this area and your focus on TRA. It's been good working with you, other members of the commission, and your staff. So thank you for all the work. As far as the spreadsheet, we came into the session this year with two goals. One, to do something about retirees and their loss of purchasing power. And number two, to lower the normal retirement age in the TRA pension plan. We are a bit of an outlier, having age 66 as the age of normal retirement age, and that really needs to come down. The other part of that proposal would be to have 25% of any cost to be shared by the employee and 75% to be picked up by the state. So those were our goals coming into the session this year. As far as the spreadsheet and the three options that relate to TRA. First of all, I would say the 7% return assumption lines up with our proposal, so we have agreement there. I also would agree with the allocation method of allocating the $600 million or the remainder part of that using the actuarial accrued liability method. That makes good sense from our view. As far as the cost of living adjustment, the 2.5%, the governor's proposal, 2.5% simple COLA, that's something in the right direction. Obviously, it doesn't cover the loss of purchasing power, but it lines up with the governor's proposal, and it is similar to the TRA proposal. The only difference between this proposal and the TRA boards. Ours was compounded, and this one is a simple COLA. As far as option number one, the 62 and 30 with an NRA of 65, this puts all the ongoing costs on the teacher, nearly 2% of payroll. And as you've heard from other testifiers, that's a bit of an issue. It would make, you should know, it would make the teacher contribution rate 1% higher than the employer contribution rate. And in Minnesota, we already have a situation where on average, the TRA contribution rate for the member is much higher on average, and on average, the employer rate is lower on average. So we're really exacerbating that situation, and now would have an employee rate higher than the employer rate.
Mr. Stoffel, if you could wrap up your testimony, please.
Yes, Madam Chair. Option two, reducing the employee contribution rate, really, we view that as, it really doesn't accomplish our goals. It's nothing we've talked about in our boardroom. So that's what I would say about option two. As far as option three, using the $145 million used to pay down the unfunded liability, that could be something of interest. Quite honestly, we haven't had that discussion either at our board. If it would help, we could try to contact board members over this next week in advance of next session, your next meeting, try to get a feel for, if we had to pick one of these options, what would be a priority. But the last thing I would say is the idea of having the COLA delay eliminated and have that absorbed by the pension fund. We just cannot support that, Madam Chair. With a 7% return assumption, we would already have a deficiency. That would actually, it's going to be increasing the deficiency, so we could not absorb any cost for a benefit improvement. Thank you, Madam Chair. Look forward to further discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Stoffel. And before I have Mr. Tensick testify, I do just want to provide a clarification on that scenario one option. We only brought that option forward because I received numerous emails from teachers saying, we know you didn't get what you wanted in your target, put what you can into it, and what would it cost us to have to then pay for the rest of that? So I want to be very clear that that was not an option that I decided that I wanted to put forward. That was an option that I heard directly from teachers who said to me, we will pay for it if you put what you can into it. And so I would just want to be very clear that that's why that option is out there. And I've heard different options of 60-90, which would be over almost 3% in order for a teacher to have to pay more into that. I've been told that reducing the age of retirement by 1 year is not enough. So there, in every one of these scenarios, there is a cost. And so I just want to be very clear that, again, we did not just decide that we would put the burden on teachers. It is exactly as a response to what teachers sent to me, multiple teachers, saying that what would it cost them if I put what I could into this plan? So I just wanted to provide that clarification, Mr. Tensick, before you go ahead and speak on St. Paul teachers' retirement. And and I will have Aaron Leonard also come up to the testifiers table as the person on deck. So Mr. Tensick, please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Herr, members of the Commission, Phil Tensick, Executive Director and CIO for St. Paul Teachers. First, I would like to thank the Commission and Chair Herr in particular. This is a thoughtful proposal. We understand your constraints. We understand how difficult it is to provide benefit increases with one-time dollars. Also appreciate that you addressed our main areas of concerns, retirees getting a COLA adjustment, active teachers getting an earlier retirement age. I applauded you for that. I have 3 comments, not complaints, truly comments, tried to be constructive. First, I appreciate that you're hearing our proposal to eliminate the drop or reducing the COLA if someone receives a tax benefit. Our basic plan members have been hindered by COLAs, and we would not be able to administer the drop for coordinated plan members because we don't have the information available to do that. Secondly, for the actives, I think there may be a proposal within your proposal that is workable. The 62 and 30 and age 65 reduction is a 2% increase. That's too much to bear. It does take contributions above the employer. If you were to do one or the other, and preferably 62 and 30, that's a 1% cost increase. It brings our employee contributions in line with employer, so there's parity there. It allows our career teachers to retire 4 years earlier, which is what they've asked for, and they have said in previous commentary that they would pay for it. I think that's a workable solution. The option 2, allows for a contribution holiday. If you were to provide that in conjunction with half of option one, you delay that increase to the employee 2 years, and allows them to prepare for that increase going forward. So I think there may be something between those two that is truly workable. Finally, a note about the notes. The 7% assumed rate of return, it's not a no cost impact. It would be a $97 million increase on our liabilities. That's a tenfold increase over the one-time dollars we're receiving. So it is, a material impact to the plan. Additionally, as Mr. Stoffel mentioned, the delay in COLAs to the normal retirement age, it's a small benefit increase, but it is an unfunded one that would reduce our sufficiency. So look forward to providing opportunities to fund those two over the next week. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Tensick. That was very helpful. I really do appreciate the options and solutions being made and the compromise of the different scenarios being brought forward. I appreciate that. Ms. Leonard, go ahead and identify yourself, and then we have Doug Anderson as our last testifier who signed up ahead of time.
Good morning, members. My name is Erin Leonard, Executive Director of MSRS. I want to thank Chair Herr, Senator Frentz, their staff, the LCPR staff, and the commission members for their work on this proposal. I know it is with a lot of hours spent, and we do appreciate the opportunity to testify, and it's a great option to have funding available for pensions. This doesn't happen every year, so we appreciate that. MSRS supports the inclusion of the assumed rate of return reduction into the package. As you know, reducing the return assumption to 7% is the position of the MSRS board based on the advice of our actuary. We also support the following components in the proposal. The one-time funding that provides elements of inflation relief for all plan members, including retirees, and a modest temporary reduction in contributions for MSRS general plan members. We do support removing the delayed COLA for those who retire early. There was a comment earlier that this was an expensive provision. In the case of MSRS, it is not an expensive provision because individuals who retire early pay for that cost in their early retirement reduction because it's a full actuarial reduction. We support extending the sunset dates for the supplemental funding, making it more than just 1 year at 100%, making it a few years at 100% or something like that. We support the one-time appropriation to the State Patrol Plan to offset the recent liabilities. Our board specifically discussed this at our last board meeting, acknowledging the disability costs over the last few years and realizing that that funding would come from another source. So we appreciate that inclusion. I'm hesitant to fully support the reduction to the vesting schedule for the general and correctional plans without further analysis. I anticipate the cost to reduce the vesting in the general plan would be small, but would want our actuaries to prepare an estimate of that cost. Last year, our actuaries did prepare a cost for the correctional plan vesting to go to a 5-year cliff, and their estimates indicated it would cost about 0.47% to pay and increase the liabilities by $3 million. So I would expect that would be higher in a 3-year vesting, so we would want to fully vet that first. Overall, MSRS supports most elements of the proposal before the commission. We would request we plan to request a full analysis of the provisions from our actuary to ensure that we're adequately funding or anticipating any potential costs. Thank you again for your efforts and the opportunity to provide feedback.
Thank you, Ms. Leonard. And Mr. Anderson, you are the last to go, so please identify yourself and begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commission members. I'm Doug Anderson, Executive Director for the Public Employees Retirement Association. While PARA does not have an official board position on this proposal, we do find it very favorable as it reflects our longstanding board positions and our funding values. There's about a dozen or half dozen components of this bill. We're favorable on all the components, and I'll put that into writing just to save a little bit of time on the testimony. I can also address in writing Senator Rasmussen's question about the delayed COLA being a negligible cost. It's similar to what Ms. Leonard described for MSRS. So, Madam Chair, we greatly appreciate the work you and Vice Chair Senator Frentz have done to secure the funding and for the thoughtful allocation. We also want to thank all staff who have contributed to the proposal. We feel like we've been listened to and about our priorities, and we thank you for responding, and thank you again for your excellent work.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And I will ask the public now, if anybody would like to testify that did not sign up ahead of time, please make your way to the testifiers table. Seeing that there is none, there's a couple of members left. I'm going to go to our member questions that you might have. Representative O'Driscoll.
Madam Chair, mine's more procedural. I want to thank the testifiers today for their input on this. So we've taken the information, we've got a spreadsheet. What do you see the next steps in the road here for folks who are here and how that might end up playing out?
Thank you for that question, Representative Driscoll. And I want to just state for everyone that we have a week to work on this, to put our omnibus bill together. I am very open for those who would like to have a conversation with me, specifically on the concerns that you brought forward, and that to walk through some of these scenarios and say, you know, what would you like to see different, knowing the budget that we have. So please reach out to my legislative assistant, and I will absolutely make time to meet with those who would like to talk about the budget spreadsheet and the pieces that impact them. And then we will bring together, and then we'll put it all together and do our best to put an omnibus budget bill together and bring that back in front of this commission next Monday. Follow-up, Representative Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then that would be the last work of the commission would be next Monday for the session unless something pops up along the way.
That is
No
correct,
future scheduled meetings.
That is correct, Representative Driscoll. Any questions, Representative Nelson? All right, well, I just want to say quick before we go ahead and conclude this meeting is that I did hear a lot today that I have a lot to think about. And I wish that I was here decades ago when decisions were made to reduce employee contributions as a result of market fluctuations. I wasn't here, and I know that we are all now trying to fix some of the things that have happened in the past. And I appreciate all of your patience as you work with me on this. And I also want to just state that, you know, that it is, in a testifier today provided that, we do comply with what is stated in statute for the employer contribution, but you are correct. We do not do what is recommended by the actuaries, and that I actually would like to look at that for the future to say, how do we do that? Because it might be too late for now, but I absolutely want to make sure that if we're asking our employees and members to comply with what actuaries are saying, we actually should ask that of the employers as well. So I really appreciate that comment today. I will take that, and we will absolutely work on that in the interim. So thank you for that comment. And I look forward to continuing to work with each and every one of you on trying to do the best we can with what we have with this budget. And so I just want to thank everyone for their testimony today, for the discussion on this. And with that concludes our business for today, members. And our next hearing will be on Monday, April the 3rd. Seeing that there is no further business in front of this committee, this meeting is adjourned.